this really brings back the Constitution. This is what it's all about. And this is really the opposite of that. I mean, the question is fine.
Everything that is in Trump's favor that corresponds to the multi-decade Republican project of the unitary executive theory, which is directly undermining the fundamental principle of the Constitution, or why it was even written, which is no kings, is actually the most constitutional thing you can do. Let's get started with the fucking Supreme Court. So for those of you who don't know, the Trump administration had a sequence of insane executive orders. Most of them are unconstitutional. And one of those executive orders was to revoke birthright citizenship. Okay. Now, obviously, this is completely unconstitutional. And they knew that it was completely unconstitutional, but they did it anyway. And what they ended up doing after getting an injunction from a lower court, from a court in, I forget which state, they had to put a pause on it, right? The case escalated all the way up to the Supreme Court, but there was one unique predicament in this. The Supreme Court decision was not around whether or not it was constitutional to, by executive mandate, revoke birthright citizenship. And it wasn't even, the Supreme Court decision was not even around whether or not birthright citizenship is constitutional or not, right? That wasn't what it was about. The Supreme Court decision revolved around another thing. How much power do state courts have in terms of stopping federal level decisions being made by the executive? And the Supreme Court decided they shouldn't have that much power at all. Here it is.
Court has just released a potential landmark decision impacting the future of birthright citizenship in the U.S. The justices were asked to roll back nationwide injunctions against the president's attempt to redefine the 14th Amendment, which states that anyone born in the U.S. is automatically a U.S. citizen, regardless of their parents' citizenship status. It's been in place for more than 150 years. But now, in a 6-3 split, the conservative majority ruled that President Trump can move forward with implementing his birthright citizenship change, except for those who brought the case, the 22 states and a group of pregnant immigrant women who brought that case. So it's not directly getting at the 14th Amendment here, but this will have a nationwide impact. Let's go ahead and bring in our Devin Dwyer, ABC's senior Washington reporter, who's been following the Supreme Court on this. Devin, it's not as straightforward as I think a lot of people were perhaps expecting or hoping to hear. So break down what this actually means.
Well, this was a big surprise, Whit, and this is coming from the youngest conservative justice on the Supreme Court, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, 6-3.
What's interesting about this decision is that you don't make these kind of moves because the Supreme Court is obviously ideologically captured, right? And they work in a partisan manner. They don't they sometimes decide against the Trump administration, but I think all of those decisions come down to upholding the legitimacy of the court to a certain degree, while simultaneously making important decisions like this one that will be truly impactful, truly beneficial to the Trump project overall. This is, maybe I'm misunderstanding this. I'm not I'm not exactly a constitutional law scholar. I actually have a unique theory. I think it's all bullshit. But the way I see this is this is the kind of initiative you take only when you suspect that your movement is never going to lose power, which I think is ominous. I think this is the kind of moves that you make when you don't think that the opposition party will ever come into power, or at least you're operating on the knowledge that the opposition party is simply a controlled opposition party, and therefore they will never take advantage of this. What do I mean by this? Because going forward, let's say in the future where we still do have democracy, okay, in a hypothetical tomorrow where we still have democracy, right? Elections take place, Democrats win. And the Democratic Party that wins is actually resembling, I don't know, like a Zoran, AOC, Bernie, like a fighting Democrat Party that wants to take decisions at the federal level, behave like Donald Trump, right? But this time, instead of doing it at the behest of the corporate oligarchy, they do it at the behest of the citizenry, at the behest of the working poor, for example. the lower courts would not be able to issue injunctions against those federal decisions at that point, which, again, dangerous prospect for a party that might lose their grip on power. Not so dangerous if that party does not feel like they will ever lose their grip on power, or recognize that even if they were to lose their grip on power, they simply don't believe that the Democrats would ever take advantage of this. Because as David Dayen points out, sounds like the nationwide injunctions on non-compete agreements, student debt relief, the COVID vaccine mandate, and much more are all lifted now. Or wait, is this only that nationwide injunctions aren't allowable for Republican policies? Also notable, Kavanaugh's view that today's decision apparently does not apply to agency challenges, and in cases under the Administrative Procedure Act, plaintiffs may ask a court to preliminarily set aside a new agency rule. It is like you don't fuck up one of the powers that the lower courts have if you're not operating. Wait, is this actually? You don't take away one of these powers unless you think the Democrats are never going to use it, or the Democrats are never going to be in power to begin with. Which also, of course, reminds me of this fantastic moment where Trump told Christians at a meeting that they won't have to vote again after this one election. He was just like, just vote for me one last time, and then y'all are good. Y'all are good forever, you know? Just this one time, boys. I promise. Just this one time. And then you're good.
As you said, in a big win for Donald Trump, saying he can move forward with that executive order that he issued on day one, changing the definition of citizenship in this country. Practically speaking, it means the president can, in the next 30 days, begin to develop guidelines for how he would implement that. It does not mean, however, Whit, that this executive order is free from future legal challenge. Legal cases in 3 different districts will continue on the merits. The Supreme Court, in oral argument in this matter, did signal that it was skeptical that it could stand up to legal muster. But at this point, the court is really weighing in on the ability of individual judges in districts around the country to block a president's action nationwide. And what Justice Barrett said today is that an individual federal court judge does not have that authority to broadly block a president. The judge, he or she, can block an individual while a case is being litigated, and in this case, that was upheld. So, this order, as it's implemented, cannot apply to those 22 states. It's going to be messy. It cannot apply to those particular pregnant women that are challenging this. But elsewhere in the country, and at the very least in the planning stages, the president can move forward, and that is a significant and surprising win for him.
What the fuck is the point of the union if every federal law is up to the states? I mean, in a weird way, this simultaneously takes away power from lower courts, so it takes away state power, but it also in the future could take away federal power depending on who or depending on what the decision is. Because like now you can't have lower courts make injunctions that pertain to nationwide issues. Like you can't have you can't have a lower court stop the executive order or the things that may come from an executive order, unless it's like up to an individual, I guess, unless it's directly impacting an individual. But it's also simultaneously, in the inverse, it simultaneously gives more power to the federal office, more power to the executive office if there is ever a Democrat in charge. And then they are basically now this unstoppable force. Do you see what I mean? Which is why I said it seems strange to do this unless you personally think you will either A, never worry about the Democrats taking advantage of this, or B, never have to worry about Democrats winning an election ever again. Ryan Grimm says this Supreme Court birthright ruling is more chaos for Social Security to handle. Now, when a baby is born, depending on where it's born, the process for getting Social Security number won't be simple and automatic. Nightmare of chaos for new parents will follow. Does this also mean that anything doesn't receive a hearing by the Supreme Court cannot bind the federal government? I mean, lower courts still matter. It just doesn't matter to the same degree. Hold on. Don't worry, the Supreme Court will change their minds next time blue Republicans get in power.
It sure is. Devin Dwyer, thank you.
It purports to remove forum shopping in trying to get nationwide injunctions, but allows each district to interpret the Constitution in their own way, which in turn will create undue chaos and burden on the system, breaking it whole. I don't know what happens to the federal government here. I don't know what happens to the lower court system here. Do they just preside over their individual districts? So America is a nation of divided of just whatever the jurisdiction, the judicial jurisdiction is, where you just have this weird balkanization of courts, where in some places you're under a totally different banner. You're under a totally different banner and a totally different set of rules, whereas in other federal court districts you have a totally different set of rules. Like it goes even beyond like states.
An amazing decision, one that we're very happy about. This morning, the Supreme Court has delivered a monumental victory for the Constitution, the separation of powers, and the rule of law in striking down the excessive use of nationwide injunctions to interfere with the normal functioning of the executive branch. The Supreme Court has stopped the presidency itself. That's what they've done. And really, it's been an amazing period of time, this last hour. There are people elated all over the country. I've seen such happiness and spirit. Sometimes you don't see that, but this case is very important. I was elected on a historic mandate, but in recent months we've seen a handful of radical left judges effectively try to overrule the rightful powers of the president to stop the American people.
Nationwide injunctions have been a seminal tool for the Federalist Society to legislate the conservative agenda for decades because they know the Republican cannot maintain popularity indefinitely. The fact that they are willing to do away with this power signals they are moving into a new phase of the master plan in which they are beyond worrying about insurances against electoral uncertainty. That is why I'm saying this is a terrifying decision. You only make a decision like this if you don't foresee yourself losing the grip of power at the federal level ever. Or even if you, in the off chance, lose that grip of power at the federal level, you know you have 100% confidence that your opposition is not actually going to use this to their advantage in the same way that you have to advance your desires, to advance your legislative agenda by executive mandate. That's why I think it's like a strange decision, because injunctions have been utilized by the Republicans in perpetuity as well when Democrats are in charge. You see what I'm saying?
From getting the policies that they voted for in record numbers.
That's a clown take. This is great. It prevents the courts, who have no business in national decisions, from interfering. Seems like something like that. Yeah, this makes no sense to me. Lower courts were out of hand with this. I mean, they're not. This ain't family court, brother. Like, this is. You're talking about federal courts. Like, what purpose do they serve? Also, the executive order is fucking completely out of hand. What are you talking about? The executive order revoking birthright citizenship is transparently unconstitutional. It is blatantly unconstitutional. They know it's unconstitutional, which is precisely why they didn't even try to fight it on the grounds of constitutionality, whether or not like this executive order is even remotely constitutional or not. Because even the most ideologically captive Supreme Court would strike this down, which is why the angle of attack was on lower courts and their capacity to issue injunctions on executive orders that impact the entire nation. Zoomers really having their futures absolutely fried and further cooked in front of their eyes daily. That's a sidecar issue. I was talking about the courts themselves and their power range. To me, the power regular Fed courts had to stop things from passing was too high. I mean, I'm going to repeat this once again. You are talking like a man. You are talking like a man who personally believes that there will come a day when there will be a progressive party in charge that will take advantage of the additional power that they have at the executive office. Okay? You're talking like a guy who thinks there are, one, going to be elections in the future, which there might be, and there might not be, I don't know. And also that once the party wins those elections, they will also earnestly utilize this new unlimited power to their advantage to improve people's lives. And I don't think that's happening.
It was a grave threat to democracy, frankly, and instead of merely ruling on the immediate cases before them, these judges have attempted to dictate the law for the entire nation. In practice, this meant that if any one of the nearly 700 federal judges disagreed with the policy of a duly elected president of the United States, he or she could block that policy from going into effect or at least delay it for many years, tie it up in the court system.
I guess in a way, doesn't this also kind of give more power and importance to the Supreme Court as well, turning it into the only court that can make impactful decisions at the federal level? And it's also obviously notoriously much slower than a number of different lower courts that you could go to issue injunctions. And it's also completely ideologically captured by this president. And considering the demographic makeup of the court, it seemingly will maintain that power and maintain that slant for quite a while. I feel like it's very cooked overall.
This was a colossal abuse of power, which never
Not
occurred
good.
in American
Not good,
history
folks.
prior to
Believe me,
recent
not
decades.
good. Don't like
And
it.
we've been hit with more nationwide injunctions than were issued in the entire 20th century together. Think of it, more than the entire 20th century. Me. I'm grateful to the Supreme Court for stepping in and solving this very, very big and complex problem, and they've made it very simple. I want to thank Justice Barrett, who wrote the opinion brilliantly, as well as Chief Justice Roberts, and Justices Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Thomas. Great people. Thanks for this decision.
No, it gives way more power to the executive. He's basically saying you need to front the money and lawyers to challenge illegal orders. Wait long enough for it to reach the Supreme Court. No, that's what I'm saying. No, I know. It gives tremendous power to the executive. It makes it infinitely harder to fight back against. And also, it adds a timeline on this that otherwise would be much faster, while simultaneously removing the power of injunction from lower courts and giving the only power to the Supreme Court, which once again is, at least in our lifetimes, most likely going to continue being slanted in a right-wing supermajority. A lot of things would have to go super well for the Democrats. The Democrats would have to dramatically change their outlook. They would have to fight fairly hard to change the system, and maybe even like add new Supreme Court justices to the bench, like take the number up from 9 in an effort to somehow change the ideological makeup of the Supreme Court. Like, none of those things are going to happen, especially with this party that we have in our hands.
And thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with numerous policies that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis. And some of the cases we're talking about would be ending birthright citizenship, which now comes to the fore. That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation.
That's literally wrong. That is what it is. Like, that's what it is. That's why it's birthright. You're wrong. Like, that's one attitude that people have because they want to dismantle birthright citizenship, but that hasn't held up in the courts. You know, this isn't the first time people have tried to change birthright citizenship, and the courts have upheld birthright exactly as the opposite of what he's presenting. Now, that might change in the future, depending on, again, how right-wing, how white nativist we've become. But ultimately, Donald Trump's assessment here is just incorrect.
This was, in fact, it was the same date, the exact same date, the end of the Civil War. It was meant for the babies of slaves, and it's so clean and so obvious. But this lets us go there and finally win that case because hundreds of thousands of people are.
It's very possible that nothing has changed regarding nationwide injunctions on birthright citizenship. While the court broadly limited nationwide injunctions, it said states may be entitled to them if it's necessary for complete relief. 2 of the birthright cases were brought by states who argued they needed nationwide relief because patchwork citizenship rules will be devastating when people move from state to state. If district courts agree, then the nationwide injunctions will remain in place. But even then, don't you have to file it everywhere? Like, what happens to a fucking birthright American citizen born in, let's say, California, where birthright is protected, when they go from the state of California to, let's say, the state of Texas, where in this world there isn't an injunction, and therefore your birthright citizenship is rendered useless? What happens to Social Security, which is a federal process? Like, what do you do in that situation? Do you get deported back to California? None of this makes sense. This doesn't just give tremendous power to the executive office. This also kind of bricks the entire federal system. It depends. In this hypothetical, are they white? Let's say they're not white. Also, what happens to interstate commerce? What happens to travel from one state to the next? Like, if you're not surrounded by blue states, are you simply not allowed to travel by car to a different state because you're fearful that they might just ship you to CCOT? What happens to a fucking truck driver who was born in one of these birthright states but is not protected now because there are some states where you are now considered an illegal citizen? Do you understand? Do you understand how stupid this is? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Just off of the birthright citizenship thing that we're talking about, okay? Just off of birthright citizenship, constitutionally protected.
Pouring into our country under birthright citizenship, and it wasn't meant for that reason. It was meant for the babies of slaves. So thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with these numerous policies and those that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis, including birthright citizenship, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee resettlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgeries, and numerous other priorities of the American people. We have so many of them. I have a whole list. I'm not going to bore you, and I'm going to have Pam get up and say a few words, but there's really, she can talk as long as she wants because this is a very important decision. This is a decision that covers a tremendous amount of territory. But I want to just thank again the Supreme Court for this ruling. It's a giant. It's a giant. And they should be very proud, and our country should be very proud of the Supreme Court today.
Truck driver argument isn't the best. Truck drivers unanimously dislike immigrants. Are you fucking stupid? I'm in this conversation. The person is not an immigrant, dumbass. The person is an American-born, formerly recognized by every state American citizen. This calls into question whether they are still recognized as an American citizen in every single American state. If you destroy birthright citizenship, and not directly destroy birthright citizenship, but try to tackle birthright citizenship by executive order, and then contest the power that the lower courts have in issuing an injunction, a nationwide injunction, and unless you can like issue a injunction in every single fucking court, or have the Supreme Court directly issue a decision on the main problem in and of itself, then you create this like weird patchwork where you have a not so united states of America, a balkanized America with different legal systems and different forms of citizenship. Like it literally takes us out of even like a European Union style structure. It's like worse than that.
Today, and with that, I'd like you to listen to the words of Pam Bondi. She's an incredible attorney general. We're very proud of her. And as you know, Todd Blanche is with us, and we have so many others that worked on this case.
Does that mean you will be illegal? No. Because I'm an American citizen right now. Unless they denaturalize all people that were previously also recipients of birthright citizenship, then no. which they might. Who fucking knows? I don't know. Sky's the limit, I guess. You know?
Case and other cases. And I think they're doing a great job.
Probably
Pam,
not,
please say
though.
a few words.
Thank you, President Trump. Thank you for fighting for all Americans. Americans are finally getting what they voted for. No longer will we have rogue judges striking down President Trump's policies across the entire nation. No longer. Today, in the 6-3 opinion, Justice Barrett correctly holds that the district court lacks authority to enter nationwide or universal injunctions. These lawless injunctions gave relief to everyone in the world instead of the parties before the court. As the Supreme Court held today, they turned district courts into the imperial judiciary. Active liberal judges have used these injunctions.
Like, the reason why this exists, in theory, is so that the lower courts could expeditiously protect citizens and not create this legal limbo, right? Not create a structure where people are left unprotected, where people have to issue, where people have to get together, figure out what kind of harm that might come about, illegal and unconstitutional decisions that the executive orders are creating to create a class action lawsuit and then try to go to every fucking court in the state, in the nation, and protect themselves that way, with the hopes that like all of those court cases will protect them at the end of this long, convoluted, and expensive process. I don't understand what this makes America look like, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know what America looks like going forward. I don't know what the American legal system looks like going forward. Like, we're just basically hoping that the administration that has routinely done illegal things and routinely overstepped the amount of power that the executive office is supposed to have, that is fully abiding by this theory that the executive office is supposed to be like a fucking monarchy. We have to operate under the expectation that they're not going to overstep when this issue in and of itself is a matter of them already overstepping and doing something that is illegal and unconstitutional. So the only thing that will hold this country together is, I guess, a hope and a dream that the Trump administration won't actually violate pre-existing laws. A reminder, a random Fifth Circuit Texas judge, age 89, blocked all of these nationally under Biden, banned non-compete agreements, student debt forgiveness, cracking down on payday lenders. Supreme Court, then, it's fine. Just so everyone remembers how corrupt this court is. Yeah, no, 100%. That's why I'm saying this is terrifying, because you only make this decision if you think that either A, the Democrats will never come back into power because there might not be another election ever again, or when they do come back into power, they're not going to fucking do this. They're not going to do anything like this. They're not going to use the additional power that they have to change, to help the working poor somehow.
To block virtually all of President Trump's policies. To put this in perspective, there are 94 federal judicial districts. 5 of those districts throughout this country held 35 of the nationwide injunctions. Think about that. 94 districts, and 35 out of the 40 opinions with nationwide injunctions came from 5 liberal districts in this country. No longer. These injunctions have blocked our policies, from tariffs to military readiness to immigration to foreign affairs, fraud, abuse, and many other issues. The judges have tried to seize the executive branch's power.
Like, this is literally how it works. This is how the courts work. There are obviously red districts with red judges. That's why people do judge shopping. That's why people go to different districts. This is how it's always worked. When a Democrat's in charge, when a Democrat's in power, and they make national decisions such as this one, you have Republican districts with Republican judges who fucking issue injunctions to stop it. And when Trump is in charge, you have liberal judges in Democratic districts that stop that as well. It's this weird balancing act, okay? Trump is just tossing that aside. He's just like, nah, no more of this. Which is basically supposed to shred the power the lower courts have, and you only do that if you have an idea that like you aren't going to lose your grip on power. Here's Lolo's proposal to get you to better understand like how much power the Democrats would have. Invoke the Defense Production Act to take public control of key supply chains, food, energy, water, pharma. Seize patent rights under Bayh-Dole Act and begin public production of insulin, PrEP, naloxone, and other essential meds. Declare vacancy and land hoarding as national emergencies. Prepare to tax or seize vacant units. Declare a national rent emergency and use federal emergency powers to suspend rent collection in federally funded housing and issue a moratorium on evictions using DOJ enforcement authority. Create a task force to determine targets for eminent domain, which will include vacant housing held by REITs, private equity, and landlords with over 100 units in major American cities. Buildings sitting empty, luxury condos, warehouses, or office buildings sustainable for adaptive reuse. Deschedule cannabis, psilocybin, and other Schedule I drugs via DOJ/DEA directive. Cancel all federal student debt via Higher Education Act 432A authority. Pardon all federal marijuana, sex work, and nonviolent drug offenders. Begin process to commute all remaining federal death row sentences. Order DOJ to stop all cooperation with local law enforcement for ICE raids, drug busts, and protests. Mass parole in place for all undocumented people using INA 212D5. End all ICE enforcement by memo. Dismantle agency via attrition. Appoint openly communist lawyers and labor organizers to head agencies and revive militant enforcement. Suspend all weapons sales and military aid to Israel and Saudi Arabia. REIT's real estate investment trusts. Like, this is technically something that a competent and ideologically minded Democratic rulership would be able to do if they were to seize power. And then one of the hurdles in its place, obviously, would be this lower court injunction that would stop this process dead in its tracks, as it did, as Paul McLeod is pointing to here. Basically everything Biden tried to do, ban non-compete agreements, student debt forgiveness, cracking down on payday lenders, etc., was immediately blocked by nationwide injunctions from the Fifth Circuit. Next then president may have just been unshackled. That is, if there is a fucking next Democratic president. But I guess also they left this in there as well. The Supreme Court ruled nationwide injunctions are bad unless they're used to block the administrative state. Nothing we say today resolves the distinct questions on whether Administrative Procedure Act authorizes federal courts to vacate federal agency action, authorizing the courts to hold unlawful and set aside agency action. Pronounce Paul McLeod. Paul McLeod. Isn't this kind of the Republicans' MO, considering Biden Democrats never actually use the executive power they get? No, when they did, this is what they did. Biden did try to fucking use the executive power to do some of these things. Like student debt forgiveness was one of the most insane parts about this, because he does have the authority, okay? The president unconditionally has the authority. Donald Trump has done this, and Joe Biden has done this in a more limited fashion, because the Department of Education is under the control of the executive. Okay. And therefore, because a lot of these student loans are offered by the Department of Education, they control whether or not they can collect that debt. Okay. And they can just permanently push it into the future. That is, a de facto version of student loan debt forgiveness. Okay. And the Biden administration had the power to do this, and they tried to do it, and obviously lower court stopped it. And then the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional. It's fucking bullshit, but they did it anyway. Yeah, you can literally say you have until the year 3000 to pay back your federal debt. Yeah, they could have done that. That is well within the power of the executive.
And they cannot do that. No longer. No longer. And on immigration, on a side note, today marks 2,711 arrests on these terrorists and these gangs. Total arrest today with HSI investigations. And thank you, Stephen Miller. Thank you to Homeland Security.
Okay, shut the fuck up. Here, let's see what he takes. He's going to take questions
A
from here on out.
very liberal state or a liberal judge or a liberal group of judges could tie up a whole country for years because their decision was sometimes.
Or when a liberal is in charge, Republicans could do so permanently. They could permanently eviscerate any kind of initiative taken by the executive when the executive is Democrat. That's the whole point of these injunctions.
Take years to overturn. We've overturned many of the decisions, but it would take years to do it. And we have to act quickly when it comes to illegal immigration. We have murderers, killers, we have drug dealers, we have what they've allowed to come into our country. Should never be forgotten. It should never be forgotten what they've done to our country. And we have to be able to act very quickly, and we're going to do that. Thank you.
Justice Amy Coney Barrett, sir, I know that you praised her and her opinion here in this case. She has taken some heat, though, from some of your supporters who have labeled her weak, a squishy, a rattled law professor. What is your take on that?
I don't know about that. I just have great respect for her. I always have. And her decision was brilliantly written today. From all accounts, yeah.
Transgender Mr. President, what would you say to Americans who fear that this is more and more concentration of power in the White House and the executive?
Well, this really brings back the Constitution. This is what it's all about, and this is really the opposite of that. I mean, the question is fine, but it's the opposite.
This is everything that is in Trump's favor that corresponds to the multi-decade Republican project of the unitary executive theory, which is directly undermining the fundamental principle of the Constitution, or why it was even written, which is no kings, is actually the most constitutional thing you can do. Like, if the Constitution as a document is, if there's one primary takeaway from the American Constitution as a legal document, it is that it's supposed to be anti-monarchy, okay? Anti-king. That is literally the most important part of the United States Constitution, is that you are not supposed to be a king. You're not supposed to have a king. There's supposed to be a separation of powers that stops kingship from happening, stops monarchy from happening. It's the entire purpose of the American state. It was the whole reason why there was a Revolutionary War at all. It was to overthrow the dynastic monarchy rule, okay? That's it. There was a whole bunch of other stuff that they wanted to do as well. They were obviously white slave owners, so, you know, I'm not getting into the weeds of it, but like the one thing is no kings. This is yes kings. We're moving in the direction of yes kings. So it's technically the most unconstitutional initiative that you can engage in. And it's so funny that he's just like, nah, this is, you don't understand. This is actually super constitutional. This is exactly what the framers intended. It's not that matters all that much to someone like myself, but of course I will still try to weaponize the pre-existing institutional power and control that is out there to the advantage of the citizens broadly. If there is ever such an opportunity, of course, and Trump is gutting said institutional power at an alarming rate right now, we're moving slowly but surely into this this even scarier position where we go from shredding the powers of the courts to basically weaponizing the courts at the behest of whatever Donald Trump wants to do. because there is a turning point here. If you were to go back to Nazi Germany, you have pre-Nuremberg race laws, and then you have post-Nuremberg race laws. When you put in a new set of laws that basically solidify, basically calcify the whatever hierarchy that you want to design society around, all of a sudden, then the courts are going to be hostile to the needs, and they kind of are already in many respects. But this accelerates that process as we move into the next step, the even scarier step, which is when the courts actually work in favor of the fascist, accelerating fascist state.
The opposite. The Constitution has been brought back.
Thank you so much, President Trump. Illegal crossings in the border are 0 now.
0. Does everyone hear that? 0.
Trump 2028.
Do you intend, President Trump?
Who's that guy? I like him. He's working the cameras.
With this new reality, President Trump, in the border, do you intend to engage personally with leaders from South America, not only Central America, in order to tackle
I do that anyway.
this situation
I do that anyway.
And if you have a perspective of meeting some presidents from South America, as Brazil, for example.
Well, you should, as an example, not South America, but NATO over the weekend.
Yeah.
They have great respect for our country now. They did things that nobody thought was.
Turkifying at an alarming rate. We will once again. The Turkification of America is imminent. I repeat, the Turkification of America is imminent.
Possible. They took funding from 2% to 5%. Nobody thought they'd ever pay the 2%, and now they're paying the 5%. It's over $1 trillion more a year. Think of that, $1 trillion. Nobody thought that could happen. That's a different group of people, different countries. But we get along with a lot of countries. We are respected again. Our country, the U.S., is respected again. Was not respected 6 months.
Yeah, oh, totally. That is so right. So right, King. Everyone's constantly talking about how much they respect us, bro.